In the good old summertime, in the good old summertime.
Concurrent to all these matters in the 1890s was the emergence of the pursuit of women's rights. Now, considering all that, how did the beautiful ladies' stand come about and why? And what role does the ladies' stand still play today at the SCG?
It's a wonderful structure, the ladies' stand. It was built in 1896. But from long before that, the trustees sought to have ladies at the cricket, women at the cricket. Members were given 2 ladies' tickets. And I think that the visions of grandeur that the trustees had, they wanted the ladies to be out in front of the lawns, in front of the grandstand and the members' pavilion during the Blokes in Play. They wanted a similar ambience, if you like, to Flemington or Royal Ascot.
Yes.
And so ladies were encouraged to come to the ground. One of the myths I discovered was that there is this feeling that ladies weren't allowed in the members' stand until Kerry Packer put his foot down in 1978. But in actual fact, women were most definitely in the members' pavilion up to the end of the turn of the century, certainly up to 1896 when the ladies' pavilion was built. When the members' pavilion was built in 1886, the old pavilion, the original pavilion, which had been built in 1878, that became a ladies' enclosure. And some of Sydney's best restaurateurs were given control of the restaurant there to try and bring women to the matches. And I found, well, there's a photo in volume 2 of the book of the members' pavilion in 1891-92 with many more women than men in the grandstand. So that myth that women weren't allowed in the ground. But at the same time, as sport became more popular, there's at the Zimmerman cycling, the members' pavilion got overrun by women. And this is because the ladies' enclosure was full, so they all moved next door. And men, as soon as they came in, the gentlemen had to give up their seats, which they were upset about because they got their hours earlier to claim them.
Yes.
So the ladies' stand basically was a supply and demand thing. And so it was built in 1896 as part of a major building program right around the ground. It was immediately very, very popular. And the women continued to go there. And one of the more intriguing aspects to the cricket ground story that I found concerned the first lady member, because lady membership, women's membership wasn't introduced at the ground until 1974.
Wow.
But quite strangely, an advertisement appeared following it was minuted that the advertisement would appear for a special category or a new category of lady membership in 1896.
Right.
In the minutes around November 1896, it's recorded number of members, single members, junior members, and it's got lady members 1. And then if you go to the SCG letter book, you can find a letter that Sidney Fowler wrote to a woman named Louisa Morgan, who lived in Randwick and who was the wife of one of the principals of the Mount Morgan mine in Queensland. And it's a letter from Sidney Fowler saying, "Dear Mrs. Morgan, congratulations on becoming a member." So in one sense, Louisa Morgan is the first lady member. But strangely, after that initial mention in the minutes that there's a lady member, that immediately goes away. But the category is advertised again in December. And the one lady member re-emerges for 3 or 4 months in the minute book before disappearing again. The concept of lady membership is not mentioned again, except for a letter a 20-year-old woman named Dora Cohen wrote to Fairland in about August 1897 saying she wanted to become a member. And Sidney Fairland wrote back to her and said, "I'll see what I can do." And then his follow-up letter was, "Sorry, I can't help you. Perhaps you can get in using your uncle's ladies' ticket." So it's hard to know exactly what happened, but what it appears to me is that they flirted with the idea of lady membership, and somebody higher up has basically stamped down and said, "No, we're not having that."
Yes.
But I wish I knew the answer. But it's 100% true that it was advertised.
Mm,
It's 100% true that it was minuted, and it's 100% true that Louisa Morgan got sent a letter congratulating her on becoming a member. But it doesn't appear, if the members register is to be believed, that she ever actually became a member. And so then lady membership became something that wasn't introduced until 1974.
incredible. The entire history of that, membership could have been different had they allowed it. Just probably someone complained from higher up and they reverted back to the old way. Really interesting.
Part of it could be as simple as in the lead up to Stoddart's tour in 1897, 98, there was a huge run on memberships.
Mm,
And it could be that it was just, again, a pragmatic decision that we didn't need lady membership anymore. And they were looking for a way of, if you like, cutting back because they were almost at the point where they'd have to introduce a waiting list.
yes.
The waiting list didn't come until 1920. But at the same time, at that time, the demand for membership was as strong as it had ever been.
Mm. Well, as we near the end of this podcast, Geoff, I just want to touch on something you mentioned at the end of, or towards the end of Volume 2, which is, as you've been talking about, Andrew Stoddart's second tour, so his English side, which comes to Australia in 1897-98. And you talk about how him and his team would have just noticed a stark difference to the Sydney Cricket Ground in 1897 to when they were last there in 1895. Further additions to stands. There was an improved scoreboard, for example. So how much of what Stoddart and his team saw and were greeted by when they arrived at the Sydney Cricket Ground in 1897 still is what we see today?
Yeah, in the book, I've got the two panoramas from those two series, and it is quite amazing the level of the building work that went on
Mm,
in the course of that time. Just going round the ground, there's the ladies' pavilion. There's a smoker's stand at the northern end, at the southern end, where the Sheridan stand and the other Churchill stand sits.
mm,
There was the northern pavilion at the northern end of the ground. There's the SCG number 2 was built
mm,
in 1890, was opened in 1897. The Bob stand was built in 1895 on the eastern side of the ground. The two hills, the Paddo Hill and the famous hill on the northeast and southeastern corners, they they were built up in this time. As you said, Ned Gregory's scoreboard. It's the bicycle track. It's
yeah.
just quite astonishing. This was all done. No government money was used. Basically, the revenue that was coming in from football and cycling and cricket and from other events, public schools, carnivals, and the like, was enough to pay for all this development.
Mm,
And the thing about it all was, even if you didn't like the cycle track, all of this was done in a style that made the ground, as I said earlier, beautiful. And that was an adjective that was used often, and that's why the book is called A Thing of Beauty. I think that part of that was that Sydney, the ground had become the pride of Sydney. I mean, when you think about it, at that time, Sydney had two things that were the best in the world. They had the harbour, which was a natural thing that God made, and they had the Sydney Cricket Ground, which was a beautiful thing that Philip Sheridan made. And yeah, they wanted the elite of Sydney to come into the members' reserve, and they did. And the people out on the hill, they all felt they were part of some sort of exclusive club, and that's the sort of thing I alluded to when I talked about the first time that I went. It was a very, very special place. And today we're left with just the members' pavilion, which was built in 1886, and the ladies' pavilion built 10 years later. I think the ground has lost some of its beauty. It's not the same as what it was. And yet, Tom, if I could tell you one little story
mhm.
at the Ashes test, the just gone Ashes test, when at the end of the test, they allowed the spectators onto the ground for the presentation.
Yes.
And I was there with a friend of mine from London, and we went out onto the ground, but not to watch the presentation. I said, come out here and stand here. And we stood at about the place where Gully would be if Tibby Cotter was charging in from the hill end.
Hmm.
And we just imagined, and I said to David, my friend, Victor Trumpet could have fielded here, or Clem Hill, or dare I say it, WG.
Mm.
And then we turned around, and if you look into the members' stand and the ladies' stand, you can make out the faces. It's quite wonderful. And you can take yourself back to 1894. But you can take yourself back to any time in the history of the great ground
Yeah.
and imagine what was going on. So you can walk over to cover and look into the grandstand, and if you were Sid Gregory, and see your brothers and your sister and your father and his and your uncle, they're all there. You could make out their faces. In that sense, the cricket ground hasn't changed at all. It's still the beautiful ground that it was back then, and I'll never forget doing that. It was really very very special.
I bet it was. I've never actually stood on the SCG. I mean, I've been there many times, but yeah, and I think I've heard. Well, you can really tell when you watch a broadcast. You see the batsmen, for example, when they score a century. I mean, they acknowledge people in the crowd very easily. It must be quite something about the distance, but also the positioning of the members' ladies stand must be
Yes.
something quite unique to that ground, and makes it a very intimate, I think, experience, and something we hope is not lost in the future.
And no cause to fear, should old acquaintance be forgot. No, 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 Australia will be there. Australia will be there.
Well, Geoff, let's conclude with some pondering. I'm going to throw some questions at you because you've now written this magnificent history of the Sydney Cricket Ground in the 19th century. Do you think there is enough recognition of those early pioneers today?
I think the ground does a reasonable job recognising its history. One thing that does great with me, and it's not the fault of the current people at all, was the decision made 40 years ago when they knocked down the Sheridan stand and replaced it with a new stand and named it after Clive Churchill, the great footballer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Churchill was a great footballer. He might have been the greatest footballer Australia's ever produced, but that new stand should have remained the Sheridan stand, because what Philip Sheridan did for the SCG is unique. When he died in 1910, Victor Trump called in the guiding spirit in making the Sydney Cricket Ground the finest ground in the world. And Sheridan should still be remembered with his name after a stand. I mean, I think the ground administrators at the cricket ground sort of half recognised that when they rebuilt the two stands at the northern end of the ground, and they called them the Noble Stand and the Bradman Stand, as the old stands have been named.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important. There's so many people you could name a grandstand after, but I think that it's a real shame that Sheridan is not recognised in that way. But at the same time, yeah, the ground, with its Basil Sellers Sports Sculptures project, with the sculptures such as Dally Messenger and Fred Spofford and Stan McCabe and Trevor Allen and Betty Cuthbert and Marlene Matthews and Johnny White, I think that's fantastic.
Yes.
They're reinstigating the Jack Marsh history lecture, which is important. The Victor Trumper and Doug Walters displays in the Trumper stand that have been introduced recently. If anyone's seen them, they're really really good. And so the ground, yeah, does look after its history pretty well. The wider game, I'm not so sure. I mentioned the Cricket Hall of Fame earlier. I think
Mm,
the recency bias in the Australian Cricket Hall of Fame is horrible.
mm,
The idea that Brett Lee would be get into the Hall of Fame before Jack Gregory just fills me with sadness. But
mm,
at the same time, mate, I listen to this podcast and I see a book like Simon Wilde's book on Gilbert Jessup,
mhm.
and I just treasure that, and I think we all should.
Yes. Well, you're in a safe place here, Jeff. But it is interesting regarding the naming of stadiums because it is a lost thing these days. There would actually be a riot if a new stand was named after an administrator these days,
Mm.
but it was the done thing back in the day. I mean, the Adelaide Oval's got the Edwin Smith stand, and it's such a shame that they knocked down the George Giffen stand. Bernard Wimpress is still angry about that, as he should be. I know, and as he puts it, it was the first stand in the world named after a sportsman. I think, but yeah, when they knock down these stands and replace them, as you say, there is a recency bias. There's always a tendency to name it after more recent stars. I mean, I can sort of see it on both sides, but it's a shame that
Well, I
you
can
lose
too.
something. You lose
Yeah,
something.
I
Yeah.
can too, and I'm a historian, and I'm going to fight for the old guys.
Yeah. Well, what do you think is the future of the Sydney Cricket Ground? And do you think its traditions and charms can withstand the powers of modernisation and commercialism?
I think it's going to be very hard. What I would like the current administration at the cricket ground to do whenever they make a major decision is to stop and say to themselves, what would Philip Sheridan do?
Do they know who Philip Sheridan is?
Well, hopefully when they read my book, they will.
Yes.
I But I really believe that because I think that Sheridan was this fantastic mix of traditionalist and pragmatist. He was a caring person. You could tell that by the way he supported junior cricket. You can see it by the way he supports his staff in notes and in the SCG archives. At the same time as being that caring person, he was also incredibly hard nosed. He was a very shrewd diplomat. So he was made a life member at Lords at a time when Australian cricket administrators weren't that popular in England. So yeah, I mentioned earlier that situation with the drop in pitch, and I do think what would Sheridan do? And I am coming to the conclusion that we're reaching a stage where he would go the way of the drop in pitch.
Mm.
And that in itself is really interesting because I think many other administrators at the cricket ground, some more modern than Sheridan, would not think that way.
Mm.
And I don't personally pretend to be an expert on the subject because as you said earlier, I can see both sides of that case. Um, but in terms of constructing new grandstands, in terms of staging Bocelli concerts and the like, um, every decision needs to be looked at with that battle between pragmatism and traditional sport to decide what is the best thing for the ground. But I do think we've reached the stage that the members' pavilion and the ladies' pavilion have survived so long that while they're still standing, they will stay because they are part of the brand.
Yes.
And which is a very obviously a modern marketing term, but it is true that those two grandstands are part of the brand. It's the reason why the images of those two stands are on the cover of my two books
Mm.
because they're so much a part of the SCG story.
Yes. And I remember hearing from Captain Andrew Flintoff when he came here with the English side in '06, '07, how I think he wrote about it in his tour book afterwards, how he wasn't a fan of the Melbourne Cricket Ground at all because it had no charm. It was a coliseum. As spectacular as the Melbourne Cricket Ground is, it could be anywhere in the world. Whereas I think cricket grounds need to hang on to their identity and not be bullied into. I mean, God forbid the SCG ever sells its naming rights to, a fast food joint or a
Mm,
superhero franchise or something.
yeah.
Hopefully, there's things in place to make sure that never happens.
I mean, I opened the book, the volume one, with a quote. I've always believed that this is the best cricket ground in the world, which was said by Sir Donald Bradman in 1973 at the
Mm,
opening of the Bradman stand. And
mm,
I have no doubt that in terms of the mixture of quality of the pitches, the outfield, the stands, the ambience, the history, everything in 1973, the Sydney Cricket Ground was the best cricket ground in the world. I will argue for that, no problem. Now I'm not so sure. I was in Adelaide for the Ashes Test this year. That is quite a magnificent cricket stadium, sports stadium. They
mm.
have done a remarkable job there in terms of combining old with new. It's
Yes.
in my view, it's quite wonderful. And the Sydney Cricket Ground's ambition should be to beat that.
Well, the thing that Adelaide still has over Sydney is that they have the hill. And if Sydney still had a hill, which I've heard, I mean, I'd never experienced it, but I've heard from other people how some of their favorite memories are from the hill at the SCG. And I have many memories from the hill in Adelaide. And you can tell when you watch a test match in Adelaide, it is the place to be if you're into that sort of supporting. I know it's not for everyone, but it's an interesting discussion because I'm very passionate about maintaining cricket grounds without losing those
Yeah.
traditions.
I did watch Test cricket on the Hill, and it was quite a wonderful place to be.
Yeah.
Grand final day, rugby league grand final day on the Hill was also a wonderful experience.
I
I think
bet.
sadly night cricket hurt the Hill
Right.
because what that meant was that I don't think alcohol was ever a problem on the Hill until night cricket,
Yes.
and then crowd control became that much trickier.
Yes, I remember watching a documentary on the ABC about World Series cricket, and I, I remember there was a news report from the time saying there was outrage when the Sydney Cricket Ground introduced a limit of 2 slabs per person. It's remarkable. Different times.
Well, and the other thing about the Hill was there for a long, long time. It was known as the Hill in the early 1890s,
Yes.
even before it was built up to its final height. And the atmosphere and the characters and the cricket knowledge, the sports knowledge on the Hill
Yeah.
for all that time was quite remarkable. One thing I know as a young person watching cricket and rugby league on the Hill was they knew what was going on.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's not unique to Sydney, but it was very, very obvious in Sydney.
One of those great photos I mentioned earlier, and I think this one is from 1891, might have been Lord Sheffield's tour. There's a great photo overlooking the hill, and you can see people just perched there. You know, they've got their boater hats on, and they're, perfect position. They're looking onto the ground, and in the background is, of course, the beautiful members and ladies stand. So, or soon to be ladies stand, I should say. So, well, Geoff, thank you so much for being my guest on the podcast. It's been excellent to hear your thoughts. If anyone is listening, perhaps next time you either attend the Sydney Cricket Ground or watch a broadcast on television, you might have a greater appreciation for the evolution of the cricket ground. I will again encourage everyone to look into Geoff's latest publication, A Thing of Beauty, the founding of the Sydney Cricket Ground. I congratulate you again, Geoff, on an excellent 2-volume publication. And yeah, thanks again for being my guest. It's been very enjoyable.
Tom, it's been fantastic. I appreciate your support and I appreciate what you do for cricket history, mate. It's very important.
It's all a bit of fun. So
Good stuff.
Thanks, Geoff. And that's all for today. My name is Tom Ford. Thanks for listening. And until next time, it is bye for now.